Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're just going to allow 1 minute for some viewers to join our audience today. So if folks can be a little bit patient, that would be much appreciated. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Before we begin our event today, I would like to start us off with a brief moment of silence in honor of all of the lives that have been lost and the people that have been persecuted under the CCP and their authoritarian regime. So we will begin a moment of silence. If everyone can please join us. Thank you. I think we all agree that the moment is never long enough because there have been so many lives lost and so much persecution and oppression. But thank you for joining us in that brief moment. So my name is Pama, and I'm the campaigns director for Students for Free Tibet, and I'm moderating this event today. Before we begin, I just want to give a little bit of background and explanation about why we have decided to host this public broadcast briefing today. So right now, as we speak, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, is hosting a press conference for the conclusion of their 137th sessions. So during their sessions, which have been taking place for the past 3 days, the IOC have discussed a wide range of topics regarding to the Olympics and to their committee in general. But one thing they have not discussed is human rights. Something they have not discussed is Tibet or East Turkestan and the Uyghurs or Hong Kong or pro-democracy movements in China and the oppression under the CCP. And so as they host their concluding press briefing at this very moment, we felt it was important for us to create a space to discuss about those issues that the IOC has so irresponsibly chosen to neglect. 30 minutes prior to this, we also concluded a closed-door press briefing with over 24 members of the mainstream international media, and we were able to discuss very in-depth with key journalists that are covering the issues such as human rights, but also covering the Olympics. And what we found was that we're not in this alone. We have a lot of avenues to have our stories heard and have our narratives shared with the world. So we want to continue fighting this campaign with the support of many people. So thank you to everyone who's taking the time to join us and further, expand that platform that we have to raise and center narratives of Tibetans, of Uyghurs, of Hong Kongers, and those suffering under the CCP. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kind of just jump into our agenda for today. Before we hear some opening remarks from our speakers, I'll just do brief introductory bios for each of them. Francis Hui is a Hong Kong activist in exile and the director of We the Hong Kongers. Zumretay Arkin is a Uyghur Canadian activist and the program and advocacy manager for the World Uyghur Congress. Dr. Tang Biao is an exiled Chinese human rights activist and lawyer. as well as a Grove human rights scholar at Hunter College. Dorjee Tseten is a Tibetan activist and the executive director of Students for a Free Tibet. He also serves as a member of the Tibetan Parliament in exile. Gloria Montgomery is a campaigns coordinator with the International Tibet Network, as well as the coordinator of the as well as a coordinator for the Tibet Advocacy Coalition. So now that everybody knows a little bit about our panelists that are joining us here today, they were also the key speakers who joined over 24 members of the international media for a closed-door press briefing just moments ago. And I'm going to start off by asking each of the panelists to share with the audience today, who I'm sure are very interested, what were the opening remarks you gave to the international media and the members of the press who joined us for the press briefing, and what message did you have for them? So you can just share those opening remarks with our audience today. And we'll start with Frances Hui.
All right, thank you, Pema. Hi, everyone. My name is Frances Hui, and I'm a Hong Kong activist and the director of We the Hong Kongers. So in October, we heard from the IOC that they want to talk to us about our ask for them to relocate the Winter Olympic Games. It was certainly an exciting news for all of us because for decades, we have been showing them the evidence of China's human rights assaults. And in the meeting, we testified with our own stories. I talked about the history of Hong Kong, how Hong Kong was seen as a gateway of hope that would lead China to open up its people to universal values, which was pretty much what the IOC thought too in 2008. And I talked about the fact that more than 10,000 protesters in Hong Kong were arrested in just a year, and the fact that China is violating the international human rights obligations. And the first thing we heard from Juan was, it is a very complicated world. And I asked again, how are you gonna legitimize a game that sets base in a country practicing genocide and murdering? And he again replied to me, it's a complex world. Ironically, I'm sure speakers here, you have heard of this all the time. It's complicated, it's complex world. It is the same kind of rhetoric that people from China always tell us when I bring up the fact that 2 million Uyghurs are interned in camps, when I talk about Tibetans having their land occupied by China, all they say is it's complicated. But to be frankly, no, it's not complicated. We have brought everything in front of you with our own testimonies to show how our people are suffering. Everything else is on Google for you to understand what they're doing in these places. Is it really hard to understand the fact that China is diminishing human rights and practicing genocide? I don't think that's hard, and it should not be complicated if you really listen to us. We got her from the meeting with disappointment because all they were doing was to stay apolitical, to gloss over the historical realities, and to disregard us. And I want to pull out a direct quote from Juan after I shared my story, and he answered, and I responded that I was really sorry to hear what he said because all I felt was being invalidated. And literally, Juan, this is the direct quote from him, was like, okay, Frances, you can take that as personal as you're doing. And it's not that I'm taking it personal, but that's my personal story with this government, is that I had to leave Hong Kong and never be able to go back home at the age of 20. And I was sitting there listening to IOC telling me that, oh, we care about the youth. No, you don't care. What about the youth in Hong Kong? What about the youth in East Turkestan whose parents are interned in those camps? What about the Tibetan youth who had never, ever had a chance to step on the land of Tibet? They kept telling us that the Olympic Games is not about politics, it's not about money. But I don't think that is what they're really doing here. They're not really doing what they're saying here. To me, if you know what is happening to these communities, what the autocratic China is doing to us, and you decide to ignore all these evidence that brought to you, that is a political statement. You're telling me that none of these matters. If the committee is taking us seriously, as they said in the meeting, they should know that rather than ignoring China's systematic human rights abuses, they can take an active role to at least stop turning a blind eye to these violation records. This is how you should uphold the Olympic spirit of human rights, diversity, and brotherhood to the youth of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francis. And I see that a lot of new viewers have joined us. What we're doing right now is we're reviewing the opening remarks, which the panelists gave to a team of over 24 members of the international mainstream media about a meeting that was hosted between Tibetan, Hong Konger, Uyghur activists, Chinese activists, and the IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee. So our next speaker, who's going to share the opening remarks that they gave to the media just briefly previously, is Zumretay Arkin.
Thank you, Pema. I sit here as an Uyghur with missing relatives, and I've lost also all communications with my family and friends in East Turkestan. And every day I live with the fear that my relatives might face the consequences of my actions, advocating for Uyghur human rights. I was able to leave at a very young age because I was one of the lucky ones. When the BBC report came out about the sexual violence Uyghur and Turkic women experience on a daily basis in the camps, my heart stopped. I was horrified. Can you imagine your own family members being subjected to such atrocities? I applaud these women for their bravery. They deserve our support. They're not only part of the numbers, they have names, stories to share, and they deserve to be heard. When we met with the IOC in October, we asked them to listen to our voices. Instead, what they did was completely dismissing our experiences and sufferings. They're so conveniently hiding behind political neutrality when it comes to China. And we also saw that they did not learn any lessons from the Olympic Games in 2008 after the brutal crackdown on Tibetans, on protesters, and others. Throughout the meeting, they told us repeatedly that the IOC's mission was to create a better world, a world with, and I quote, absolutely no discrimination based on race, religion, gender, sexual orientation. But a better world to us means a free and democratic world where there are no camps, no forced labor, no cultural and religious repression, no arbitrary arrests, no police brutality. A better world is a world without genocide. Our question was very simple. Does the IOC accept hosting the Olympic Games in a country that is actively committing genocide? And the answer we received was also very simple, that yes, the IOC is willing to host genocidal Olympic Games. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zumretay. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Tang Biao to give his opening remarks from the media briefing. So I think due to technical difficulties, we can move to Dorjee Tseten to give the opening remarks. And when the technical difficulty is resolved, we will return back to Dr. Tang Biao.
Okay, thank you, Pema. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Pema, and it's an honor to be with you all again. I like to echo everything my colleagues said here before me. As a Tibetan representative, when I joined the meeting with the IOC, I had the opportunity to present evidence of Chinese government's extreme human rights repression inside Tibet, particularly after the 2008 Beijing Olympics. After 12 years, the human rights situation has only worsened as we witness the unimaginable suffering and repression. What we are witnessing now in Tibet is an outright assault against Tibetan people with a fundamental aim of eradicating my people and our identity in our own. 1 year after the end of 2008 Beijing Games, we witnessed the first Tibetan self-immolation. Now at least over 156 Tibetans have set themselves on fire in an extreme actions spotlighting China's crushing repression and violations. I spoke directly to Antonio Samaraj, Beijing 2022 Coordinator Commission Chair, about the fact that in the lead up to 2008 the IOC had refused to acknowledge that there was an issue with China hosting the game, given the situation in Tibet. It wasn't until thousands of brave Tibetans, monks, nuns, lay people, students, nomads, and farmers, many who lost their lives, took to the street to speak up about China's brutal crackdown. I left the meeting feeling hugely disappointed that the IOC were again failing to live up to the Olympic Charter. The representative response during the meeting was insult to me and all the Tibetans inside Tibet who jeopardized their lives in 2008 to show IOC that China hosting the game was not acceptable. IOC failed once again, and with Tibet now ranked as the second least free country in the world, along with Syria, history is repeating itself, not only linked to 2008, but we see similarities all the way back to 1936, the Nazi Olympics, when Hitler used the games in attempt to legitimize the genocide against the Jewish people. Hosting the games in a country committing genocides, ethnic cleansing, and occupation is aligned to endorsing the crimes. So now it falls on governments, civil societies, individuals like you who are watching today, and media and people of conscience everywhere to take a stand and put to end to ignoring China's human rights disasters. There must be a coordinated boycott of Beijing 2022 games, and we must stand with the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your opening remarks, Dorjee Tseten. I do want to just clarify that Tibet is now I think what you meant to say was the least free country in the world, alongside Syria. So just wanted to clarify that for any viewers who are watching. Next, we would like to hear some opening remarks from Dr. Tang Biao.
Oh, thank you. 20 years ago, the IOC repeatedly told the world that the Beijing 2008 Olympic Games would bring more openness to China. Many goodwill people also believe this. The Chinese government made official promises to improve press freedom, rule of law, and human rights. But what happened is, not only did the Chinese government violate human rights during the Beijing Olympics, but also because of it. A few months before the Summer Olympics in 2008, I myself was disbarred, house arrested, and kidnapped by the Chinese secret police and tortured because of my criticism of the Olympics, because of my human rights activism. I co-authored an article with Hu Jia disclosing the human rights violations before the Beijing Olympics, and Hu Jia was sentenced to 3 years and a half. Since then, and especially since 2015, when Beijing won the right to host 2022 Olympics, the human rights situation in China has dramatically deteriorated. Beijing didn't keep its promise, and Beijing didn't want to keep its promise. Chinese legally acknowledges free speech, religious freedom, and personal freedom like that, but what they have been doing is the opposite. Beijing ratified at least 24 international human rights treaties, but it did not respect them at all. What the Chinese government wants is to manipulate the commitment, to politicize the Olympic Games, and to utilize it as a propaganda bonanza for dictatorial regime. And so, as I wrote in the op-ed for the Washington Post, giving the honor of hosting Olympic Games not once but twice to a regime that is committing genocide and assaulting human dignity would bring disgrace to the Olympic movement and display a total contempt for universal human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tang Biao, for your opening remarks. And I would also like to request Gloria Montgomery for the opening remarks.
Thanks, Pema. Hi, everyone. My name is Gloria. It's good to be here today. So, as my colleagues on the panel have already mentioned, our meeting with the IOC in October was in many ways quite a difficult meeting, predominantly because it felt like the IOC were having the meeting with us more so that they could say that they were having the meeting with us rather than because they actually were willing to listen or act on anything that we had to say. So what do I mean by that? Well, for instance, there was a total lack of recognition of past mistakes regarding the 2008 games, that how rather than result in human rights improvements in the countries, that there had actually been a further crackdown. Instead, they spoke about the positive legacies that they had left. They gave examples of the positive environmental legacy. They spoke about the Olympic blue sky. If I can just ask Pema for you to pull up a graph here, that's the top 5 emitters of carbon emissions worldwide. You can see China's in red there. I'm not really sure what positive environmental legacy the IOC are referring to, but there's nothing controversial about this graph. You can see since 2008 that has only further increased, and also at a very fast rate. Thanks, Pema. On top of that, countless environmental activists continue to be arrested and locked behind bars by the Chinese authorities for raising environmental concerns. Anya Sendra is a Tibetan nomad who was sentenced to 7 years in prison in 2019 for peacefully raising concerns about mining in Tibet, for the illegal hunting and poaching of endangered animals there. A 7-year sentence. And if these are the examples that the IOC is quoting as positive legacies, you can only imagine the human rights situation in other areas that even they don't regard as positive. Throughout the meeting, we heard responses such as, "We're not the United Nations," or as Francis already mentioned, Samaranch was very keen to repeat that it's a very complicated world, it's a very complex world, or, we have assurances from Beijing. If the police get an assurance from a domestic abuser that he's not going to beat his wife, after his wife has provided evidence after evidence that her husband is in fact beating her, the police don't say, "Great, our job here is done. This man with a history of reports against him has given us his word. No further course of action is needed." Of course they don't say that. It's just not how it works. You can't have one of the world's worst human rights violators give you their assurances that they're going to be on their best behavior and take those assurances at face value. The IOC said during our meeting, and I quote, "So far, nothing is telling us that what was promised in 2015 will not be delivered in 2022. Did they miss the headlines? Because we've all seen them. So we asked, well, what was promised? What assurances did China agree to? We mentioned that there were no public records of these assurances, which makes it really difficult to hold China to account, right? Surely you need to know what they've promised in order to know whether they've upheld their promise. We didn't find out during the course of the meeting. It would have been good to know. We could have actually had a discussion about those then and there. Instead, they seemed to be delaying the discussion by saying that, they would send them to us after the meeting. So after the meeting, we asked for the assurances. No email came. We followed up, asking for them again, and still no reply came. It's now March, the 12th of March, 5 months on, and we haven't heard back on those. If the IOC can't keep their end of a bargain, how on earth do they expect China to? So we find ourselves in a situation now, where the IOC has shown, much like it did in 2008, that it's totally unwilling to act, that it's unwilling to listen, and that it's unwilling to do the right thing. It wants to reward China with a space on the global stage, exactly when it shouldn't, in the very moment that it shouldn't. if not now, when there is a genocide being committed against the Uyghur and Muslim population, when there is a ripping apart of Hong Kong's vibrant community, and when there is a brutal crackdown being led against the Tibetans, then when? To give a little bit of visual imagery, the Beijing National Stadium, which is where the 2008 Summer Games were held, had a capacity at the time of the Games of 91,000. Even if we take the 2 million estimate of Uyghurs incarcerated, and there are much higher estimates, you could fill almost 22 stadiums with people who are currently in camps. 22. How many more people need to be locked up before the IOC will change course? How many more children need to be taken from their parents, where their parents are put behind metal bars, before it's time that the IOC will say, maybe it's not the right time to be handing China over the mic, to be taking their promises at face value? Maybe it's the time for boycotts, and that's what we're pushing for. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gloria, for the opening remarks that you just shared with us. So I think that concludes the opening remarks. For those that are joining, the panelists were sharing the opening remarks that they presented to a group of over 24 members of the international mainstream media at a press briefing we just had moments ago. And right now, as we speak, the IOC is having their own press conference, and President Thomas Bach of the IOC, who has just been re-elected for another term, even despite his failures to lead this organization in a morally just way. He has been re-elected just yesterday, I believe it was, and they're having a press briefing and he is giving his remarks. He will not mention Tibet, Uyghurs, Hong Kong, or China, or human rights, and that's why we are here to discuss those issues with all of you. So I would like all our viewers that are tuning in from home today to use the chat box or the comment streams. Please submit your questions for a Q&A. These activists that have joined us today, all of them have done immense work in the movement in general, but also with this Olympics campaign, and they've all met with the IOC personally. They've had a lot of opportunities to consider what they believe the IOC's correct course of action is. So if anyone has any questions for them, please feel free to utilize the comment stream to ask them. And I'm going to open up the Q&A discussion with one question of my own. And following that, if there are any questions, we can start taking questions from the audience. So the question which I want to open the floor with is, we heard a lot just now from all of your opening remarks about the really negative kind of feelings that people had about the meeting. It was very kind of a difficult experience for many of you to lose so much hope. It was a very hopeless feeling after meeting with the IOC. So with that being said, if you feel that the IOC may not be an institution that we can rely on or we can look to care about human rights at all, do you think there is any type of action or pressure that the International Committee can put on the IOC, either directly or indirectly, to actually start seeing results from them, actually seeing concrete changes in the way that they conduct business as usual? And if so, what do you think those pressure points might be? And I think there are a wide range of possible pressure points, and maybe we can have panelists answer with one each so that they can go a little bit more in depth on that one pressure point that they want to highlight, and then the other panelists can touch on the other pressure points. So would any of the panelists like to address that opening discussion question first?
I can give it a go. I think it's very important for governments around the world to take this issue seriously and commit to a boycott. It is a way, to send a significant message to Beijing, to China generally, that in terms of, in the context of genocide and crimes against humanity, we will not give the mic to China or a country that is hosting, the games, or a country that is committing a genocide. I think all responsible governments has the responsibility to address this issue in a meaningful way, listen to their own constituents, and make sure that, you know, no blood is, you know, shed, or no blood is part of the hosting of the Olympic Games, because this will set a precedent for future Olympic Games. If China is allowed to host a game while committing a genocide, what is our future looking like? Do we want to be part of a community, international community, where, you know, you can have any kind of crimes committed, and then this the host country is allowed to host such like prestigious events? Do we want to live in a world like this? No, we don't. So responsible governments have to act now, before it's too late, and before we set these kind of precedents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zumretay. And next, I would like to pass it over to Frances Hui to address the question.
Yeah, so I think more reaction from the world government and international organization on China's abuses would really help to pressure IOC, just by showing them the historical realities to, you know, what is happening in these places. 2 months ago, the US declared China's practice to Uyghurs are basically practicing genocide. And just a few hours ago, the EU announced that they're going to target 4 Chinese officials and 1 entity for human rights abuses. And for a long time, we thought EU is a difficult playfield. We have repeatedly called on the EU to implement sanctions on Chinese officials, and today they're finally moving to do something. And aside from that, the option of boycotting the Olympic Games, the 2022 Olympic Games, are actually still discussed by different countries like the UK, US, and Canada. And specifically in the US, I do know that the government is still open to discussions. It seems to me that the congressional members are still considering that and opening discussions with us about the campaign. So I think all the side projects and all the play field can do something to pressure them, to show IOC what is actually happening, to show them the human rights abuses. Obviously, we have shown them the evidence already, a lot of them, but you know, it's never too much, right? Just to show them all the international organizations are recognized, that all the governments are seeing what they're doing and they're watching. So yeah, I think that, you know, focusing on also the side projects is also important to pressure them.
Thank you, Frances. And we're going to have a response from Tang Biao as well regarding the question of pressure points on the IOC.
Yeah, the IOC's attitude is extremely unacceptable. They have chosen to be the accomplice for genocide Olympic. But there are many things that the international community can do. I have noticed that the ski champion for 2014-2018, American athlete has spoken out. So anything like a symbolic boycott or diplomatic boycott is extremely helpful. And one thing I can mention here is the Olympics sponsors. There are many global enterprises, companies sponsored Beijing Olympics and financially support the IOC and the international human rights community and everything. Everyone concerns about the Beijing Winter Olympics should give pressure to those companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tang Biao. And next we can hear from Gloria.
Thanks, Pema. Yeah, I think that, you know, it's definitely true that we came away from the meeting very demoralized by how the IOC had responded. But I think I can also speak on behalf of everyone here and say that we've all been really, really encouraged by the support that we're witnessing on a global level and the backlash that we're witnessing on a global level, including from athletes themselves who are speaking out on this. And you can see that there is a consensus on the need to do more to pressure China to halt its human rights abuses. Obviously, we've heard about pressure for a diplomatic boycott. We've heard about engaging with athletes. I think maybe if I can just add that there is obviously avenues to be engaging with corporate sponsors of these events, including the likes of Mars and Snickers, and trying to raise concern about, how the very thing they shouldn't be doing in this moment is encouraging China's PR strategy of showing them as a very open country, and so trying to engage with them in dialogue and through pressure to get them to also pull back from their sponsorships. So yeah, very very short comment from me.
Thank you, Gloria. And I think that you're highlighting a really important point of these corporate kind of pressure points we can apply on the IOC. We all know as a society that money talks. And so hopefully the people that are tuning in today will see a lot of campaigns around these issues moving forward. And people should all keep an eye out, especially to see what sorts of campaigns activists are able to pull up regarding Mars and other corporate sponsors as well. And lastly, we'd like to hear some a response to the question about pressure points from Dorjee Tseten.
Thanks, Pema. Am I audible? Okay. So, yeah, I echo our representative mentioned about different tactics that can be used. I can see in the live discussion there are a lot of people who I know and people who have been supporting our work. I want to thank them for joining. Most importantly, I want to let people know, especially our viewers, that it is unlike 2008, as the repression increased by Chinese Communist regime, the resistance is growing. And you can see with this campaign on Olympics, over 200 groups representing Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Southern Mongolian, Chinese democracy activists are joining together to work on this campaign to really build a campaign that really makes China accountable, and that is really good. We had a meeting with IOC, and as a speaker before me mentioned how disappointing it was. To be honest, from my side, we had very little hope from IOC. With that, now we are reaching out to the global community, governments, individuals, everyone, people who are conscious to join this campaign. And as we know that China and Xi Jinping is using IOC, the Beijing 22 Olympics as a platform to further legitimize its illegal repression and occupation, it is our responsibility to really expose the reality of the Olympics and the doing of IOC, which is already happening. It is important. I know, like in our campaign, in our work, we meet many people who will tell us it is not possible. But when we come united, I think it is possible, and that's what we are seeing. We are seeing response from Chinese government recently, where they are threatening countries who will join boycott will be punished. It is Chinese government who is threatened right now. It is IOC who is threatened, because we have written to them numerous times in 2008, in 2015, when IOC award China. But when we come together jointly as a united force, IOC actually wrote to us that they want to meet us because they are threatened. And they know that truth is on our side. Having said that, this is a genocide Olympic. We need to realize that every people, media, civil societies, government, individual leaders, people, athletes, people who are part of, and people who want to watch the Olympics, we are not against game. From the very first moment, we said we are not against the game. We want people to come together, but not at the cost of lives of people, not at the cost of genocide that is happening. What we are witnessing right now, China, which has become a beast that is now out of control, that is threatening the life of people, not only oppressed, but around the world. It is the doing of the international community of appeasement and failed policy that we have engaged over the years. Governments and people are standing up, and I think Olympics is an opportunity for us to stand strong together, and it is time to say no to China, and they will listen to our pressure. So that's why I think it has to be coordinated boycott. Government, people in the staffers, the people who are working for the for the governments and for the leaders should not shut down us, like saying like it will not work. How far we will wait? We have been saying all the time it is not possible. If we don't wake up now, when we will wake up? So I think the most important thing is the people who are being oppressed, Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, certain Mongolian Chinese democracy activists you are seeing here, is leading the movement. We are the force, and we are showing the direction. And what the governments and people need to do is follow our leadership. That's what I want to say here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dorjee Tseten. That was our opening question, which was talking about pressure points that that we can leverage against the IOC during this push to boycott and relocate the Olympics in 2022 away from Beijing. And I want to just take a moment to highlight all the comments that are coming in. There are a lot of comments of support, particularly about the solidarity and how important this campaign is. So thank you everyone who's tuning in and sending your messages of support on the comments. And next we're going to open up our Q&A. We have already been receiving some questions about the campaign from the audience. If you're just tuning in, make sure to drop in any comments or questions you have in response to the panelists. The question that we have from the audience is, why did the IOC give a second chance to host the Olympic Games to China without any genuine observation of human rights improvements in Tibet, Uyghur regions, Inner Mongolia, and Hong Kong? And so I think our panelist Zumretay is going to address the question first, after which I'll open it up to the other panelists.
Thank you, Pema, and thank you for that person who asked the question. I think the answer is simple. It's money, right? I don't think there's any doubt about this because clearly after 2008, there has been a severe crackdown on many, many people. The Tibetans, the Uyghurs, Southern Mongolians, the Chinese people, Hong Kongers, Taiwanese. So I think we can't waste time and think about other arguments, because clearly it's the money. Money speaks louder for the IOC. They prioritize money over human rights. We've seen it. We've met with top officials of the IOC, and they have dismissed our own sufferings. So I don't think we need to go further than this. And I mean, the IOC has the choice of hosting the games in there are nearly 200 countries in the world, and they chose China. I mean, yeah, I think just money speaks louder for them than human rights. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Zumretay. Would any of the other panelists like to address this question? I see Tang Biao. Dr. Tang Biao?
Yes, it is money, and IOC doesn't care about human rights, the morality, and even its own reputation. And we should not forget that in 1993, China applied to the 2000 Olympics, and it almost get it. So it lost with only one vote. 1993, that was only 4 years after Beijing, the Tiananmen massacre. Another reason is the Chinese government would have tried everything to win the Olympics. The legal method, illegal method, everything. They would have tried everything. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tang Biao, for the response. And would any of the other panelists like to ask that question as well? Okay, Francis?
Right. So I think we can look at HWO, the WHO, to understand what IOC is thinking here. At the beginning of the pandemic, the WHO was denying the fact that it is turning into a pandemic, and literally because of their slow reaction, it basically harmed the whole world because the world is not alarmed early enough to take any actions, take any measurement to address the pandemic, the problem. And so that's why now we're sitting here at home and, talking virtually just because of this pandemic. It's harming everyone. And I also want to bring it to everyone's attention is that yesterday in the IOC meeting, they actually announced that they're going to buy China's vaccine for the Tokyo Olympics that is going to happen in this summer, and also the Winter Olympics in 2022, which means that all the athletes are going to get vaccinated and take that vaccines from China. We all know that. We all know how China is harming the world with this pandemic, and we can see there are so many options out there, so many other vaccines that you can take, and they chose to buy vaccines from China. If it's not money, I don't know how I can, rationale the whole their thinking. Look at the now the Chinese vaccine is available in Hong Kong, and in only 2 weeks, 4 people have already died after getting vaccinated, and 69 people appear to have abnormal reaction. 1 people got a stroke. 1 person got face paralyzed. And why is IOC not looking into these? And why is IOC not looking into all the evidence we show about how China is abusing human rights, is diminishing freedom in these places? There are so many things out there for them to know, but they're turning a blind eyes to all these evidence, all these numbers. So I don't know how to understand that, but I think we can also look into past cases like WHO to understand what they're thinking. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for the really compelling examples, Francis. And so we are going to go to the next question now, which is also from the audience. So thank you to all the audience that are submitting questions. Please do feel free to continue adding questions into the comment box, and we have someone moderating those, and so we will be addressing them. The next question is also from our audience. Hi, Sienna. The question is, how can people encourage their governments to boycott the games? And this question, I think we're going to, Gloria, would you want to start us off with some responses?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. I think that's a great question. I think it's one that we should all be asking. And I think, it's start the conversation. Go and meet with your representatives, express your concern regarding the decision to award Beijing the Winter Games. I know obviously at the moment that, we're all in a pandemic and meeting in person, which is often feels more meaningful, we can't do, but there are other avenues. You can meet with your representatives online. You can, even this group here, we have, a website. It's No Beijing 2022. We have actions on there where you can be emailing individuals, including governments around the world, raising concern about the deteriorating situation, for those living under Chinese rule. We have one that speaks recently about, there has been a huge number of Tibetans who have died in police custody, particularly in the past 2 years. But unfortunately, we had 2 deaths just this year already in January and February. And those are just the ones that obviously we get information on. And so that's, again, an opportunity whenever, a concerning story comes out and you want to speak to government representatives, use the story, tell the story. There are so many stories, as Zumretay said, during her statement. These are not just numbers. They're not just statistics. These are people with families, and their voices deserve to be heard. So there are many avenues to be doing it, and definitely signing petitions and meeting with representatives is certainly one of them.
Thank you so much, Gloria. And I really do want to stress the point that Gloria made. those are just the deaths that we know about. And, all the numbers, all the facts and data that we present, it's just what we know about. And that really doesn't do justice to all the atrocities that are happening under the blanket of surveillance behind the Great Firewall in Tibet and East Turkestan, and also increasingly so in Hong Kong as well. Would any of the other panelists like to address this great question? How can people encourage their governments to boycott the games? If not, we can go to the next question, I believe. I think that was a great answer, Gloria. So our next question is from Isabella Yang. Do you think the recent crackdown on activists in Hong Kong is also an effort by Beijing to stop boycotts of the Beijing Olympics in 2022? And for this question, I think I would like to request if our panelist, Frances, who is an exiled Hong Kong activist, if she would like to respond.
Yeah, I think definitely. But to be more precise, I think it's an effort to avoid any opposition against China, not just the 2022 Beijing Olympics. They want to stop any kind of opposition that is happening in China and Hong Kong and every other places against them. And we all know that recently the 47 activists were arrested and charged for their participation in the Democratic primaries, and they're now detained. They're all of them are people who have been so active in Hong Kong movement, and to be frankly, if they are arrested and they are now behind bars, it just leaves people wondering, oh, what's next? Like, is that the end of our movement? And now in the LegCo there is no opposition because all the opposition are now in jail, right? And there is no opposition in the Legislative Council, just like the National People's Congress. Is that all you see when they vote, when they get things voted, it's all yes and there is no nay. And you know what happened when there is no democracy? Everything is so efficient, and we got huge bills that finished all the discussion in only 1 month, and they are ready to be voted on already. And a few hours ago, the NPC, the National People's Congress, passed a bill to recompose the election committee in Hong Kong. And I don't know why they're trying to pretend that there is democracy in Hong Kong. Now, with the NSL, the National Security Law, what I see, it seems to me that they're trying to make Hong Kong just another city in China. You know what I mean? And all they're doing, they're not specifically targeting, the Olympic Games, but in general, they just want to eliminate all the opposition happening against them. That's what I think it's happening in Hong Kong right now.
Thank you, Frances. And I think all the points that you are raising are extremely important. And we've heard a lot of people saying in the media, now Hong Kong has become one country, one system. And I think that's exactly kind of the point that you're also highlighting here. And we're going to hear back from Gloria as well as the last responder for this question before we move on to the next question.
Thanks, Pema. I think Frances gave a really great response, so I'm not going to speak directly on Hong Kong, but I just wanted to say that, when it comes to China's efforts to stop boycotts, or more generally, when it comes to China's threats on other countries and individuals for speaking out, this isn't something that's new. This is something that we've been witnessing for years and decades. Even in February, when there was a huge vocal voice about calls for boycotts for the Olympic Games, the Chinese authorities turned around and threatened to sanction any countries that took the avenue of boycotting the Games. And that's something that has been going on for a long time. After the Norwegian Nobel Committee awarded the 2010 Peace Prize to Chinese dissident Liu Xiaobo, China cut its trade ties with Norway for 6 years. And they only normalized those trade relations in around 2016. So this is what China does. It's exactly the reason why we need to push back. And we see this in the UN too, where China loves to threaten human rights defenders and intimidate them. And unfortunately, for those that report on human rights violations and then return to China, those risks are very, very serious, and they're often arrested and disappear. So yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that this is by no means new tactics by China, and they'll be using everything at their disposal as the year goes on, and as they become more concerned about the global pushback, that there'll be threats coming left, right, and center.
Thank you for adding that important analysis, Gloria. And we have another question also from the audience. And so for those that are tuning in live, in case you just joined, you can add your questions into the comments box, no matter where you're streaming from, whether you're streaming from our nobeijing2022.org website or YouTube, or whether you're tuning in from Facebook. You can add your comments, and we have moderators that will be keeping an eye out for all of your inquiries. The next question we have is from François Zhou, and the question is, how can we recruit the athletes into this cause? I think that's a really important question. I do want to ask Tang Biao first if you'd like to respond to the question, and after Tang Biao, we can see if any of the other panelists have some thoughts as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's not easy to encourage the athlete to take actions, and I think they can do as much as they can, not necessarily a boycott, because it's really in conflict their profession, and this Beijing Olympics put them in a moral dilemma. But they can post something on their social media. They can send a message when in Beijing, wearing a T-shirt or kind of other protest. So they can do something to send a message to the world that something terrible is happening. And I really hope everyone in the world who have direct contact with the athletes, maybe in a fan club, so they can talk. I really hope you can talk to the athletes going to Beijing, and let them know what's happening in Xinjiang. Let them know the Uyghur genocide, and let them decide to do something, not just attending regular Olympics without doing anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tang Biao, for the response. And I would like to see if any of the other panelists want to address an important question. Yes, Francis?
Yeah, I think, so as I mentioned, the world governments they're still discussing about this option, right? And I think it's hard for athletes to take any actions or boycott the Olympic Games without their government saying anything. It's hard for them to, individually protesting against this game if their country is going to participate, right? And so I think it's more about, to engage the athletes is more about engaging the world government and educating them, letting them know that this campaign is happening and why we're doing this, and keep discussing with related, like, certain policymakers about the issue, about the campaign, and in a way to move them to really talk about it in the Congress, talk about that with their colleagues, and explore options to see if they are going to put more pressure on to IOC. I think that would be more like an approach that we're taking right now. But I do agree that moving the athletes or talking to them is also one of the way to do it from the ground, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Francis. And I think Zumretay will also want to add a couple points here as well.
Yes, just quickly, I think even national Olympic committees have this responsibility to brief their own athletes before sending them on the ground, because the athletes they have, they have to know about the situation, because what happens if they get arrested for showing support for the Uyghurs, Tibetans, or Hong Kongers in China once during the Olympic Games? If they're detained, disappeared, or arbitrarily, arrested, what happens? The National Olympic Committees are responsible for these athletes. So they have to be able to brief the athletes beforehand, and also assess the risks, and make sure that, even like the IOC has this responsibility to make sure that the athletes have the freedom to say what they want, but then also have a plan in place to also, if something happens, to be able to intervene and have a dialogue with China or the Chinese Olympic, the organizing committee as well. So athletes, there are many ways of engaging with athletes, but I think there are also actors who are responsible for these athletes as well, because they're also human beings at the end of the day. So going in China for anyone with dissident views is a very risky thing to do. So I think responsibilities fall on governments, national Olympic committees, the Olympic Committee itself. So yeah, we have to keep pressuring these different stakeholders on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Zumretay. And I think you raised a really important point, that these athletes are also people as well. And with that, there was a recent piece that I think many of the viewers here may have seen, which was covering an Olympic gold athlete who's a winter skier from the United States, who is one of the most well-known winter athletes in the world. And she did a piece with CNN where she's basically saying that she's put in a situation now where she feels like she has to choose between human rights and morality versus doing her job as an Olympic skier. And so this was a real statement made by Michaela Schriffen, who is, an Olympic gold winter athlete. And I think that comes to the question, when the IOC decided to host the Olympics in 1936 in Nazi Germany, when you think about Germany and all the Germans who might have played a role in allowing the Holocaust to happen, and following, generations later, many people still have a lot of remorse and guilt and negative feelings, and they still suffer because of what had transpired before, which maybe their community didn't speak out on. So now it's coming to a situation where I don't just think the athletes are helping us. We can also help the athletes stand on the right side so that they don't have to constantly feel a negative feeling, a generation later, when what we already know is happening inside East Turkestan in Tibet, when those things are exposed in a generation from now, will those athletes feel that they have, let down the international community by attending the Olympics in a country that's hosting a genocide and occupation? And I think that we can actually also, support the athletes by providing them that information to decide with full transparency, but also supporting that they're in a very difficult position. And Dorjee, I see that you also did want to respond to that question. And we do have one last question. We're a little bit over time now, but we're going to get through one more question after this one. And thank you all for tuning in so far. Dorjee?
Yeah. Thanks, Pema. I think most important thing is believing in what we are working, believing in the human value. People have conscience. This is not the first case. There are people who had spoke up and suffer from their stand. Recently, last year, the footballer who spoke up in support of Uyghur has also faced the challenge. And we know that people take stand, and this is time to take stand and question our moral, whether it's right thing to do or not, or which side of history that we are going to stand or not. Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, people who are right now watching, we need to first believe that it is possible. The same question that was asked in the beginning, why IOC again awarded Olympics. I know there are a lot of things involved, which speakers mentioned, the money and everything. But most important thing, because we allow IOC to do that. We allow our government to, to appease China, this kind of policy, which has now led us in this situation. Now, when we see genocide happening, over 3 million Uyghurs behind concentration camp, what else need to be to really wake up call for the people. So I think it is important that people are standing in case of Tibet movement. We know that in terms of Hollywood, China's influence in all these international platform has over the years so much, because they feel it is important. I was checking last time, over 2 dozens of actors and actresses has actually spoken up and supported Tibet, and because of that, they had paid costs. But now is a time, as we are united, like Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Southern Mongolians, everyone. I think international community need to unite. Athlete community need to unite. It's difficult for them to come out singly, but then people have to come together and raise voice. But when we come together and become a united force, I think IOC or China, no one can stop. And this is the only way we can stop the genocide. This is the only way that history doesn't repeat. That's all I need to add here.
Thank you so much, Dorjee, for your response to the question on athletes and the cause. I also would like to move to the next question now. We have one final question. I know there were some questions that we weren't able to get to, but hopefully, in the coming months, we can have platforms like this again, where we can continue engaging in dialogue as a community. The final question is, how and in what way would it help to protect human rights and achieving the goals of other related activities or movements if we were able to stop Beijing Olympics 2022 from happening? So that would either be from cancellation or relocation or boycott of this Beijing Olympics in 2022. How would that help and improve the situation for human rights and for the causes of all of the groups that are here represented today? And I believe we are going to launch that question with Zumretay, and we're going to go to Gloria directly after that to address this question, and we will open it up to panelists. Francis will be next after that. Thank you. I'll pass it over to Zumretay.
Thank you, Pema. It's a good question, and I think if we do succeed in a boycott, or even I think just right now, I think with all of the pressure, it will do a lot for human rights, because first of all, it won't set this precedent of allowing genocidal regimes to host these events. It will also mean that we are listening to affected communities' voices and uplifting their voices. We can't live in a world where big corporations or organizations are cheating on people's lives. We have to be able to live in a positive world where people's voices are respected and human rights are respected. I mean, we have so many grand ideas, grand human rights principles, but if we're not able to uphold these ideas and principles, which are also enshrined in the Olympic Charter itself, to live in a better world, without any discrimination, then I truly don't want to live in a world with countries are allowed constantly to be given this kind of platform where they can show their genocidal policies to the international community. I really don't think it's a future we all want to live. We want to live in an actual future where there is no discrimination, where a better world for us means a world without genocide, without human rights violations. And I think I think someone mentioned it earlier. We're not against Olympic Games at all. I love winter. I'm Canadian. I love winter games. I know they're not as popular, but for Canadians, we love winter games. We're not against the Olympic Games itself. We're just against the IOC hosting this in a country that is committing genocide. So I want to be able to watch games, Olympic Games or sporting events without, feeling like I'm supporting this regime. And you should be reflecting on this question too. Do you really want to watch a game where, that millions of people are suffering behind the scenes? So, and also Olympic Games, we should also be able to go to these games. I, as an Uyghur, I cannot go and just watch the games because I want to. I can't because I'm banned from entering the country. Or if I do, I will be arrested and disappear, or maybe put in a camp where I do go through sexual abuse by Chinese officers. So you have to be able to take all of these facts into account when you think about these kind of events. And I think we do want to hold these people, these corporate sponsors, organizations, governments into account, hold them accountable for what they're doing. So yeah.
Thank you, Zumretay. And I think we will hear some remarks from Gloria next.
Thanks, Pema. Zumretay put that much more eloquently than I could have done, literally hitting on all the points I wanted to raise. So just sort of echoing, that it is worth remembering that a boycott doesn't mean no games. We're all sport lovers. We're just asking for the games to be moved to a country that is not committing genocide. And when you put it that way, you realize that what we're asking for is not the world. It's something actually very simple. It's something very reasonable. And it's something that the majority of people in the world would agree with and be on board with. I think when it comes to how it would help the cause of human rights, I think it would send a very, very clear message that China can't just do what it wants and be given a place on the world stage, be given opportunities for PR, be given a mic to say, which they have done through their Beijing Olympic Committee, their national committee, to speak about how open they are. I mean, we know how open they are. They're the #1 jailer of journalists worldwide. They should not be handed the mic to speak about openness right now. But aside from that, I think that, not only does it send an incredibly damaging message to China that they can do what they want, but it also sends a really damaging message to the entire international community. They learn from China, other human rights abusers. China sets the benchmark and the standards as well for which they can follow. And if China gets away with it, then what incentives and motives are there for them to feel like they have to correct their own situations nationally? So I think this provides a really, an important move for human rights, not just for people who are interested in China and not just for those who are interested in justice in the region, but, more globally on issues of promotion and protection of human rights of all of us everywhere.
Thank you, Gloria. We have Francis next, and then after that, I will ask if Dorjee or Tang Biao have any remarks they want to add to this question about how relocation or cancellation of Beijing Olympics would impact human rights. So, Francis.
So yeah, I think as Dorjee just said, the game is going to be named as a genocide game, and when these countries they decided not to join, not to participate in this game, or the IOC decided to relocate the game, it shows their commitment to human rights and freedom to the people who are, to basically to everyone in the world, to show that this is their standard and they're not standing with that, what China is doing. And I think even though in the case that we can't make IOC relocate the game, even in the case that we can make governments to boycott the game, we have made our statement and our voice heard. I think that's the most important thing, that is why we are here. And I think, resistance is the key to bring attention to the issue that we're trying to advocate for, right? And we have made the issues in Tibet and East Turkestan, in Hong Kong and Taiwan to the public attention. And while China is trying to redeem themselves and fool around people and organizations around the world, while they are trying to cover up their human rights violations records, we are here to show that what is the actual history, what is the actual reality, and what they're doing to people in our homes. So definitely, I think this campaign is so important, and I truly admire everyone here who is part of this campaign. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the response, Francis. And I want to echo what you said in the comments. We see Yangchin Dokar said, thank you to the speakers for coming together. It really is a cross-movement effort. And in her comment, she wrote, we are all fired up. This year will not be quiet. So I think it really does echo everything that you were just saying, Francis. And it's so great to see that those tuning in are also having the same energy and the same level of commitment to, really targeting the IOC and are shining a light on their lack of concern for human rights in the international platform. So thank you to Francis and also to our viewer, Yangchin Dokar, for the great comments. And I would like to see, Tangbia, would you have any remarks that you would like to add to this question for now?
Yes, briefly. The Chinese government has money, has military, and it's more and more aggressive on international states. A lot of supporters from the regimes with bad human rights record, but the Chinese government does not have legitimacy. By hosting Olympic Games, it gains legitimacy, it gains endorsement. So with this kind of engagement from athletes, from IOC, from all the other countries, the Chinese government will crack down on the society more severely. The human rights situation will be definitely deteriorating. So so that's why. That's why we should call for cancellation or boycott.
Thank you, Tangbia. I think that's a really important part. The Olympics give China the one thing they can't buy, which is legitimacy. But I suppose now the IOC has created a scenario in which they can buy their legitimacy as well. So Dorjee, would you like to respond to this question next? And this will be the last response. I think
you're muted
right now.
Yeah, I think you're muted.
Sorry again. Can you hear me now? So, everything has been covered. Nothing left from my end on that. Just want to say thank everyone. Like, I'm so honored to be work with such a strong team here, and just want to say thank you, Pema, for coordinating the briefing. You did an amazing job today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. And before people tune out for today, there's just one more quick thing I wanted to just share with everybody, which is that we have our No Beijing 2022.org website. And also there is the hashtag on social media, which you can see pinned on our screen over there. And in case people were wondering why we had this panel today, it is because the IOC hosted 3 days of continuous sessions where they talked about everything from Beijing Olympics to winter sports and summer sports. And they re-elected Thomas Bach as the president for the IOC for another, I believe, 5 years it is. And one thing that they just did not mention at all is Tibet, East Turkestan, Hong Kong, and human rights. And that is completely unacceptable. So we have created this while we were speaking, while you guys were tuning in. Thomas Bach was giving his address at a press briefing to the international media about that. And so we felt that if he refuses to mention the issues that are so important, then we must take the lead and responsibility in doing so ourselves. And just about an hour or two prior to this briefing, we also had a closed door briefing directly with members of the international press. We had, over 24 members of mainstream media that were there to ask us questions and were eager to hear about this campaign. So, with this cross-movement panel we have, and all those that support us and watch, I think that this campaign is something that's really important. And for the next, 10 to 11 months, you can be sure that the IOC can try their hardest, but they can stop talking about the issue. They can try to silence us. They can not give us the evidence, not give us the response we want. But what they cannot do is make us stop campaigning on this and raising this issue in any platform we get the opportunity to. And even if we don't get the opportunity, we will create one ourselves. So thank you all for helping us do that today. And we look forward to seeing all of you in the campaign again moving forward. Thank you to all the panelists for joining us today, everyone.
Thank you, Pema, and everyone for such a brilliant
Thank
panel.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Pema.
Yeah.
Oops.